This is the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, Kenyatta Cavill of Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Come mix it up in the lab where the course lecture is in session every Tuesday from 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live, YouTube Spreaker, or the BCSN app, as we discuss all things about the HBCU sports culture, including exploring the week that was in the sporting HBCU diaspora, as well as the upcoming week of HBCU sports. With me, the Dean, the College of HBCU Sports, on Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Course lecture dismissed.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports Network. They can follow their dreams. Welcome back to the BCSN SportWrap. Bryan and A.D here, and we stay busy. It's a lot of stuff going on this past week. Obviously, going all the way back as far as the, as we mentioned in the last segment, the All-Star game. But we've also got plenty of college basketball news and notes to talk about. Drew, one of the things I thought that came out of the NAIA and even the conversation that we had with Coach Powell at Tuskegee is the debate or questions that come about with seeding in the national tournament. And it's just something that I heard you say on multiple occasions in regards to the NAIA, that you felt that the NAIA didn't do us, and us being HBCU schools, any favorites. Now, I don't know if you were just saying that in just sort of, just in general conversation, or if you feel like there's some real bias there, is there really something to chew on as it relates to biases that you see, biases that you think exist? I wanted to give you a chance to kind of expand on that, because I have a thought that came to mind, or that comes to mind, when I think about HBCUs and small schools and even the national tournament, as we are days away from the NCAA Division I selection show. So I give you a chance to kind of expand on your thoughts there in regards to scheduling and whether the NAIA tournament is quote unquote fair. One of my least favorite words in the dictionary.
It's a 4-letter word,
Starts with an F. I can think of another 4-letter word that starts with an F.
Yeah. We used to have this phrase, it's hard, but it's fair. Well, when it comes to this stuff, it's hard, but I don't know if it is fair. What do I mean? Let's just start off with the basics. When you look at just about any rating system, when you start at the bottom, from the bottom and go back to the top, when you look at the bottom on the Division I level, the lowest two conferences are BAC and SWAC, just conference rating. When you go to, what's that?
I was going to say most times.
Most times. When you go to Division II, when you look down towards the bottom, you see the SIAC. CIAA is lower third. It tends to be. When you look at NAIA, you see GCAC as the typically towards the bottom of the conference ratings. So what does that mean? That usually means your conference is a one and done league, as they like to call them. You get your one automatic bid that you're entitled to, and that's it. And the SIAC is a perfect example of that this year, without them having the tournament to have the automatic bid, because the conference could have sent their regular season champion if they would have played and decided to actually host championship events, but because they did not decide to host championship events, each of those schools played as an independent, but they still kept the conference framework together. So when it came tournament time, it was tough. And I believe it was Coach Jackson at Rust in our conversation with him who talked about how tough it was with the schedule. You know, if these schools will play you, you have to go to them. They won't return the game. So now you go through, you have to play these games on the road. You're not getting at home gate, which adds revenue to your athletic program.
Right.
It costs you to go on the road. So now we can't compete because we're not getting that revenue at home. And when it comes to these small schools, ticket sales are probably one of your bigger revenue drivers, even though they aren't, it isn't that great. But you don't have a whole lot of sponsors. You know, we don't have Nike sponsoring small schools. You know, the FAMUs of the world, if you are lucky enough to get a Nike to sponsor them. But you know, you don't have Nike, you don't have Coca-Cola, you don't have your All-States and your national company. You've got the local office maybe kick in a few dollars, but you don't have the national sponsorships for these schools. So it's not a level playing field because of that. These teams are reluctant to schedule you. They only schedule you in their house. And if you beat them in their house, then they're not going to schedule you again. So how do you get a better conference rating and beat the better competition if the better competition is running from you?
Well, let me ask you, it sounds like what you bring up a lot sounds like a conspiracy theory to a degree, because as I hear it, why is that, or how is that any different than another small school? Is it really different than
it seems like it's magnified
deals with?
But it seems like it's magnified by our schools. You can't get tradition. You can't get a tradition if you're not allowed to get to the dance to build a tradition.
But we have tradition.
So,
we have well-documented traditions.
Not when it comes to competing on the national level, though.
So how does a school look? I hear what you're saying. I wonder, what can an athletic director do to change and I think to change the fortunes of his programs, but I think there is probably more give than take in the beginning that has to happen. What can an athletic director do?
And to be honest with you, he is going to have a partner at a HWCU that's willing to give him those opportunities. That's willing to play them. That's the only way that it's going to change. Number one, or number two, you have to do what Talladega has done and join a historically white conference. One of the two things will have to happen for a lot of these schools. And that single bid that you do get has to make a run, a la Tuskegee in 2014, a la Virginia Union back in the early 2000s. Those schools have to make those runs deep in those tournaments to get your conference that respect. Then the next year, another one of those teams has to make a run so that they know whoever comes out of this conference is going to make a run. You know, well, I think it was like 3 years ago when we had 3 SIAC teams out of the 8 in the Southeast region. Morehouse was the number 1. I think it was 2017 or 2018. Morehouse was the number 1. Clark was in and I want to say Benedict was the third team in there, but don't quote me on whether it was Benedict or not. But anyway, we had 3 teams in there. You know what they did, Brian? Two of the 3 HBCUs played in the first round. So we knew somebody was going home. And unfortunately, number 1 Morehouse lost in the first round also. So by day 2, there were no more HBCUs in that region. We were lucky enough to get the 1 year we were lucky enough to get 3 in, we screwed it up. When we get to that point when we get 2 and 3 in, we've got to make that run.
The schools have to make that run. The teams have to make those runs. I mean, that's
correct.
Correct. I always wonder, us versus them. I will say in some degree when I think about the national tournament, some of the things that I've talked about when I think of us versus them, I've maintained, and I've had this thought for several years now, that our teams do themselves an injustice by having a conference tournament at the end of the year. Now, because of the mere fact that the conference tournament is a recipe for upsets. When you played a full regular season schedule, when you played everybody once or twice, or if you have it split up into divisions, but everybody's played everybody at least one time and hopefully a second time. Playing a third time only runs the risk of your best team losing, and thus takes your best team away from competing against the other best teams in the country. So think about the number of years where I'll go women's basketball. Think about the number of years Bethune-Cookman's women have got knocked out in the tournament when they were the best team in the regular season. Think about the number of times in the MEAC where, maybe it was Coppin State back in the 90s, or maybe it was North Carolina Central. They were the best team in the regular season, proved it over the course of 17, 18 games. But then all of a sudden, you lose in the semifinals or the conference tournament. Guess what? You're done dancing. There's no opportunity for you because, like you just said, you're a one-bid league. So, to me, I felt like for a long time, I know a lot of conferences have sort of sold themselves out to play in these conferences. I mean, we're watching conference tournament week this week. The small schools, they get a little shine on ESPN. Hell, nowadays, it's not like you get shine on ESPN2. You're on ESPN3, ESPN Plus, which that stuff doesn't even get rated. And and for some services, you have to pay for them, or you have to be a part of the streaming platform. Hell, you could be on Flow Sports, which now is a paid access. So you don't even get seen by everyone for free. So why have these conference tournaments? I mean, do these tournaments, and look, I know what the CIAA tournament does. That's the rarity in Black college basketball. Do these other tournaments really do anything other than take your best team away from the opportunity to go play on a national stage and represent your conference, maybe win the game, or do what North Carolina Central wants to have done, which is what? They want to be the first team to go to the Sweet 16, right? Well,
right.
Can you really do that if you got to go through the gauntlet of your tournament after playing a 17, 18 game regular season? And then you got to go play in the first 4. Then you got to go play against a 15 seed? Probably not. What if you came in as a 14 or 13 seed? Now you're playing one of those Power 5 programs that were the last to get in, right? So
usually,
I think that's one thing that, you'd have to be able to show me and tell me that the economic reasons for playing these postseason or these conference tournaments make sense, because honestly, they don't. They don't make sense to me. And I'll go one step even further. I think we're moving to a point, Drew, where I don't think the national tournament makes sense on the NCAA level, to be honest.
Not for us.
No, I'd say for any small school. If you are a mid-major, I'd say outside of maybe the top 10 conferences, how many conferences are there in Division I? There's probably about 20.
Well, you in basketball, you know, in football, you got your P5 and your group of 5.
Exactly.
So
it's more diverse
when
or exclusive.
when you come back, when you give a basketball, you add the Big East and the I believe the A10 as your power conferences. You got 6, maybe 7 power conferences.
Okay, but also some of those group of 5s also have good basketball schools in them. So
but I'm just talking about on the conference level.
Right. So my point is, I thought I said you got about 10 legitimate strong conferences at Division I basketball level, correct?
But what's the conference with Gonzaga? West Coast Conference, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Okay. I outside of Gonzaga and BYU, can you name another team? But you know BYU mainly because of their football, not for their basketball. They haven't had their basketball players since Sean Bradley. So
right. No, there's no national, there's no major program in the WAC. No, there isn't. No. You know, you have the Gonzaga is a rare, it's rare. It's an oddity. You know,
yeah.
I just think you're moving to a point where, you know, I hate to call it the NIT, but honestly, the NIT would be a better tournament suited for the non-power 10 conferences.
What happened to the CIT, the CBA, or whatever it was called?
Yeah, but you know,
the 16-team tournament.
Yeah, they play best of 2 and 3 or something like that. I just think they're moving to a point. I mean, honestly, no one wants to. Honestly, if you didn't make for a lot of these big conferences, the 12th team in the Big Ten is the first team that didn't make the national tournament. Do we really want? Do we really want to see that team in the NIT? No. Are they even?
The black schools would be better creating their own tournament.
No. I'm not even and I'm not saying the black.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah, but no, I mean, come on, who's paying to see that? Who's paying to see that?
But just like when they came up with the Celebration Bowl, who thought they would pay to see that?
That's one game. You can't compare. I don't think you can compare a basketball tournament to a bowl game. I disagree. I don't think the viewing. I don't think it's there. I think the reason that the Celebration Bowl works is because 1, it's football. 2, it's a bowl. 3, it's surrounded between the 2 major conferences and the mythical Black College National Championship. So you can
Bryan, you could take 10 teams from HBCU basketball, put them in a tournament, put them in a bracket, and play ball. You can even go up to 16 if you want a truly even bracket. 2 from each, 2 from the SWAC, 2 from the MEAC, 2 from the SIAC.
But you can do that during regular season. I'm saying give a true national. Take your 2 or 3 teams, put them in a tournament with some of the other non-major. I'm talking bigger picture, a tournament that is inclusive of teams that are not in the national tournament.
Who we gonna play? Who you gonna put? Big South, MEAC, SWAC, Ivy League.
Yes. All of the bottom tier.
Basically all the FCS conferences in football would go to a basketball.
There are 30 or 31 conferences in basketball. Okay, 30 or 31, if I'm not mistaken. 30 or 31, something of that number.
Low 30s, I know.
Low 30s.
Yeah, low 30s get automatic bids.
There are 14 to 15 of them that have no business and get no shot in the national tournament. Their budgets don't allow for them to have a shot playing the net. The only reason they expanded from a 32 to 48 to 64 was money. It wasn't about anything else other than money.
So your Patriot Leagues, your Colonial Athletic Leagues,
They all of those teams belong in its own tournament. That's what really would be and look, that would be your NIT, your National Invitational Tournament. That's what
that is the NIT, because the second place team in the Patriot League, the second place team in the OVC, et cetera,
the first place
tends to wind up in the NIT.
The first place team has no business going to the national tournament, so they can go win one.
Or just like you said, those regular season champions that lost in their conference tournament, or those teams that usually wind up to the NIT.
Yeah, whoop-de-doo. You got one game you won a game as a 14 seed against a 3 seed, then you turn around and then you get to play the 6 seed and then you lose. Great weekend for you and your fan base. Hooray. Anyway, I just think it's something will have to change in the next 5 years, I think, as the money changes because of COVID. Pay attention to what happens to money and college programs. Something will happen, something will change that will I'm telling you, I just think schools ought to get in front before they get left behind. Get in front of this problem. Don't wait and don't be reactive. Be proactive. Go get in front of this stuff until, and don't wait around for the NCAA and don't wait for television. The television, we're playing on ESPN3 now. No, you don't even rate ESPN3. They don't even sell packaging for ESPN3. They don't even sell commercials. They run a little ad in the commercial times to say, your broadcast will be back in 30 seconds.
The only reason it's considered television is because it has those 4 letters in front of it.
My point exactly. Anyway, interesting debate. We'll maybe we'll talk about it on some other levels. But I do think it'll be interesting to see what happens to our NAIA schools, what happens to Tuskegee women in the tournament, and then obviously, look, whoever comes out of the MEAC and SWAC, they'll be playing in the first four in tournament, I'm sure. So, we'll kind of see what they do there. Let's do our players of the week before we drop out to a commercial break. Let me go through our new players of the week and our new rankings, Drew, because I think they are worthy of some mention. Last week of the regular season for the NCAA schools, and then of course the NAIA schools. So let's start with the men, the large school men. The last week of the regular season, our player of the week was Jawan Daniels, the 6'7" junior from Harlem, New York, from Prairie View A&M. Helped the Panthers go 3-0 the last week of the regular season. They even won their 3rd consecutive regular season SWAC championship. Daniels on the week, he did have a career high 30 points, 10 rebounds in one of his contests during that week. I believe that was against Alcorn in an 81-69 win. Prairie View beat Alabama State, beat Southern, some good games that week. I think that's the second time that Daniels has won that award. And then as we get into talking about the postseason awards for the SWAC, I got a little beef with the SWAC voters as it relates to Mr. Daniels. Our small school men male player of the week. Our small schools men, we should change that. It should say small schools male player of the week or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, our men's player of the week, small school division. I always get tongue twisted. Jeremiah Moore from West Virginia State, the 6'6" senior from West Orange, New Jersey. Drew, how many guys from West Virginia State has won this award? I believe this is now the third different player.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, in the final game of the season, Jeremiah had 41 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 blocks for the West Virginia Yellow Jackets. Is their season over, Drew?
Yes, they lost in the conference tournament.
Season over. So Sorry to see that. But a good season by West Virginia State. We'll have more to talk about with those guys later on. Our player of the week in the large school women's division. This was a tough one, I thought, because the SWAC, obviously 3 games this week. Our player of the week goes to Deja Rogan, a.k.a. Rogan, for Jackson State, the 5'4" guard from Ripley, Mississippi. Averaged 17 points a game, 4 rebounds per game, 2.7 assists, 2.7 steals. More importantly, she was a part of a 3-0 week for Jackson State against in a week that they had to win the final game of the regular season against Alabama State in order to secure the SWAC championship. And of course, that game would go down to a 2-point game, 64-62, I think was the final, or something of that nature. It was a 2-point game. And I believe the first time those teams played, Alabama State won, and it was a 2-point game then. So and look, it was a close call between her and Shemaya Ward. And I think whoever would have won that contest would have been our player of the week. Had it been, had Alabama State won and then eventually won the conference, then probably Shemaya Ward would have won. So shout out to Rogan, Miss Rogan, but then also to Miss Ward, who had a good week as well. And then our small school women's player of the week, Ashika Alexander, in the championship game of the SAC, the Sooner Athletic Conference. She had 30 points, 11 rebounds in the title game. And of course, Langston as a 7 seed, knock off a 3 seed, knock off the 2 seed, get to the championship. And because their conference is a 2-conference league or a 2-bid league, Langston earned their bid to the national tournament. So that was it for them. So those are our players of the week. Again, Jawan Daniels, Prairie View A&M, Jeremiah Moore, West Virginia State, Deja Rogan, Jackson State, and Ashika Alexander of Langston.
Brian, I want to throw something in on our previous discussion that you just made me think about. Maybe the NCAA ought to go to a 2-bid system where the regular season champion gets in, the tournament champion gets in, because I think it's ridiculous that the P5 schools can get 9 teams in. If you don't finish in the top half of your conference, why are you even going to the tournament? I'm gonna leave that there.
You say that though, but that you say that without any acknowledgement of who the tournament is for.
It's for the big schools.
Okay, so why would they do anything less then? Why would they?
I'm just throwing it out there. This is the opinion of A.D. Drew.
Okay, but I'm gonna challenge you, Drew, because that is an opinion that I hear from a lot of people without any kind of forethought of the fact that who is this tournament for? So if that tournament is designed, as you just said, for the larger schools, why would the larger schools do anything to reduce the number of their teams that get in? Why would they
get paid? They get paid for every team that's in their tournament.
Who gets paid? No, they don't.
Yes, they do. The conference gets money. The conference gets money. Yes. And each individual school gets money.
Yes. So why would you reduce that by letting a second Patriot League or second MEAC or SWAC school? Why would you reduce that? You won't.
Equity.
Equity? What?
Equity.
In what way?
Because those smaller conferences, they'll be able to compete until they get a bigger piece of the pie. The only way they're going to get a bigger piece of the pie is if they get more teams into the tournament.
Who does that favor, Drew?
It's going to favor those smaller teams who are not getting that piece of the pie.
So why would the big schools do it? That's like you having your big house saying, Drew, I want you to give up some of your big house for your neighbors down the street who live in that little tiny cottage. Give up a little bit of that nice comfy couch to your neighbor so that they can come sit and take up room on your couch and drink your water and use up your electricity. Oh, they're not going to be able to pay for it though, Drew. They can't afford it. They're not going to have the money to be able to pay for the electricity and the water bill. Why would they do that? There's no advantage to do that.
But that house down the street, that shack down the street, degrades your property value if it's not maintained and brought up to standard.
Yeah, but if I okay, all right, but that's then you know what? I just bulldoze that house. Then I get rid of that house.
And now you got a vacant lot. So unless you build a park there, your property value still goes down.
Look, I'm telling you that.
Let's digress and move on. I almost hate that just popped into my mind in the middle of your conversation.
Yeah, I'm mad because I'm like I can't even believe you. Okay,
let's move on to the polls.
That's all right. All right, moving on to the polls. All right.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids' apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Follow the Black College Sports Network on social media at MyBCSN1, the number 1, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MyBCSN1. Large school men's top 5. This is the end of the regular season poll, and the final in the hunt teams were North Carolina A&T State with 11-10. They were the number 1 seed of the South in the MEAC. You had Grambling State finish 11-11. So here's our top 5. Top 5, number 5 was Morgan State. Finished the regular season with a record of 12-7. Number 4, Jackson State.
What? I was gonna say, going back to the in the hunt team. What are we gonna talk about the thing that happened to one of the in the hunt teams? Or we gonna come back to that?
Oh, sure. We when we start to talk about the tournament stuff, yeah. Let's say that before talking about.
Okay. All right.
All right. So number 5, Morgan State 12-7. Number 4, Jackson State 11-5. Number 3, Texas Southern with a record of 10-8.
13-8.
Okay, at the end of 3-7, I'm just going off the graphic here. The graphic says 10-8. So
all right, the graphic's incorrect.
All right, so
we need to talk to the graphic designer. We're gonna have to fire him.
Yeah, we have to talk to him. Texas Southern 13-8, number 3. I probably should. Am I looking at the wrong sheet? Instead of the graphic, I probably should be looking at the spreadsheet, huh?
Yeah.
I should look at the spreadsheet. All right, I'm looking at the graphic.
I'll finish it up.
Yeah,
number 2.
I got it.
Okay.
I got it all pulled up here. Norfolk State, formerly the number 1 team with a record of 14-7. Unfortunately for Norfolk, they did not finish as the 1 seed in the Northern Division. They actually lost that to Coppin State. So with the loss, the new number 1, probably the hottest team in Black college basketball, that would be Prairie View A&M, who I believe have won 12 in a row, and are coming at the end of the week. They had won 12 in a row. They are 14-4 at the end of the regular season. Do we know that to be correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So Prairie View and Jackson State actually finished as the co-champs of the regular season by virtue of the fact that neither team lost a regular season, but Prairie View did play 2 more games. And with that, they ended up as the 1 seed in the SWAC tournament. Jackson State ended up as the 2. And I believe had Prairie View lost a game in the regular season, Jackson State would have finished as the 1 seed.
Correct.
And then Texas Southern is the 3 seed. So it sets up for an interesting. And what's interesting?
And who was Texas Southern only lost to?
Pop quiz. Oh, Prairie View.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, but what's interesting is Prairie View and Jackson. Matter of fact, Jackson State has not played Prairie View or Texas Southern this year.
Right. They did not do the Texas swing, and the Texas teams were not able to get back to Jackson.
Right.
As I believe the week they were supposed to go back to Jackson was the week of the snowstorm.
Right. Exactly. And the only reason Prairie View and Texas Southern ended up playing that game is because they are in Texas, and that was the end of the week for that snowstorm.
Yeah, matter of fact, that was the only game that was played in the SWAC that week.
Yeah, so it's really interesting how that kind of played itself out in the SWAC, and it all sets up for, if it all works out, it sets up for interesting semifinals where you potentially could have Texas Southern versus Jackson State, and then on the other side you've got Prairie View versus either Grambling or Southern. All right, small school rankings. Here we go. On the outside looking in, you've got a 12-11 Lincoln, Missouri into their regular season, 12-11. And you have Edward Waters, who finished 12-8 to end the regular season. I forgot. Edward Waters lost in the conference semifinals.
Semifinals, correct.
Okay, so here we go. Number 5, Benedict Tigers finished 9-1 from the SIAC. Division II, pretty good season, very good season for Benedict. Did Benedict have enough games to qualify for the NCAA tournament?
They needed one more.
Okay, so they were one short. Number 4, our number 4 team did have enough wins or enough games under their belt, and that was Miles College, who finished 10-1. And there was a very interesting tweet I saw from Miles' coach. I don't know, did you see that tweet from Miles' coach?
I responded to that tweet.
Yes, there was a. I
thought, and then I took it one step further later on in the day.
Okay, I want you to come back to that once I finish this 5. I want you to read that. I'm gonna give you a second to pull that tweet up, read that tweet, and kind of what that reply was. So number 3 are GCAC tournament champions for the second year in a row, Xavier New Orleans, 13-4. Number 2, moving up, I believe.
No, number 2 has been number 2.
Number 2 has been number 2 for a while. Okay.
Number 2 and number 1 have not changed in about 4 or 5 weeks.
Okay, so from the Southern States Athletic Conference, Stillman College with a record of 16-3. They were rated as the 13th seed in the national NAIA tournament, which earned them a 1 seed. Earned them a 1 seed in the tripods, one of the 16 tripods, which was pretty interesting. The number 1 team at the end of the regular season still is Talladega College. Finished the regular season 24-3, losing in the championship of the GCAC tournament. It cost them a 1 seed, I think. They finished as the number 18 team in the 18th seed in the national tournament, which makes them a 2 seed in the national tournament. The NAIA national tournament is what I'm referring to. So again, that's 5 Benedict, 4 Miles, 3 Xavier, 2 Stillman, 1 Talladega. Drew, did you find that tweet regarding Miles?
Not yet. I've retweeted so much stuff.
Well, let me go to
I'm still looking for it.
I'll give you a little more time to find it. Let me go through the women's, and then we'll come back to you, and you can read that up. Hopefully you'll have it. Okay, for the women, large school women's division, Alabama A&M and Southern were both in the hunt on the outside looking in. Southern with a record of 11-10, Alabama A&M with a 10-6 record at the end of the regular season. Number 5 in the large school women's was Morgan State. The Morgan State Bears finished 11-3. They're really only losses for Morgan State. They finished 2-2 against Howard in the MEAC North. So unfortunately, one of those losses cost them an opportunity at winning the North. So they kind of end up on the southern side or the bottom half of the bracket, where potentially they'll have to play North Carolina A&T, or really they will have to play North Carolina A&T in order to advance. Speaking of the Aggies, the North Carolina A&T Aggies, with a record of 12-2, are number 4 in our poll. I think the highest A&T ever got in our poll was 2. I don't think they made it to 1. A lot of controversy with that by some people.
You're correct.
The number 3 team, a former number 1, I think, Alabama State, with a record of 14-3. And
correct.
I'm sure had they managed to beat Jackson State, they might have finished the regular season in our poll as number 1. Number 2, Howard University, 14-3 as well. Very impressive season by Howard. They finished as the regular season champs in the MEAC North. And our number 1 team, who really, what's interesting, they had been kind of just laying off in the cut as like the 4, the 3, maybe even as the 5, even all the while they were winning all these games. They never quite, the numbers just never pushed them all the way up into the top until the very end of the season. And our new number 1 is Jackson State, who finished the regular season 15-5.
Now, Brian, I don't know if you paid attention, but I believe for the last 4 to 5 weeks, we've had to do number 1 every week. Those teams have flip-flopped between 1 and 2 and 3. I know this is the 3rd week we've had a different number 1.
Yeah, look.
Last week it was Howard, Alabama State. All 3 of them have shared the number 1 spot.
Yeah, I think it'll be a shame. I mean, with all respect to all the other teams, it'd be a shame to not have a MEAC championship that is Howard versus North Carolina A&T, and a SWAC championship that's Jackson State versus Alabama State. I mean, I think for one fact, I'd love to see round 3 between Jackson State and Alabama State. And I just want to see round 1. I mean, unfortunately, because of the way the MEAC set their schedule and never adjusted it, Howard and A&T never got a chance to play each other. And so They have these records and they have everything about their great seasons, but it is without having to play the best team, the other best team. And if you're a Howard person, you're thinking you're the best, and so we didn't have to play the second best team. If you're an A&T person, you're thinking we're the best, we didn't get to play the second best, which was Howard. Right. And if you're a Morgan State person, you might be arguing in that mix too, because look, I mean, Morgan split against Howard and never got a chance to play A&T. So
yes,
so
correct.
Just to recap, number 5, Morgan State, 4, North Carolina A&T, 3, Alabama State, 2, Howard, 1 is Jackson State. And very quickly for the women, because that did change. We do have a new number 1. That hadn't changed in a while in the small school women's. Benedict and Langston were on the outside looking in. Langston at 7-7, Benedict at 10-3. Of course, Langston is going to the national NAIA tournament. Number 5 ends up as Edward Waters, 12-5. I think one of the biggest travesties is the fact that their RPI in the NAIA was, I think, the best of any HBCU.
And from what I remember researching, was the best of the teams that were left out.
Yeah. So you know what's crazy? That's probably a product of, you hate to say Xavier's win knocked them out, but you could probably say Xavier's win knocked Edward Waters out. I mean, there's got to be somebody else who may not have been as deserving. I didn't do it that deep a dive into the RPI numbers, but if you wanted to just look at it on a conference basis, that's what happened. I think, it affected everybody. Rust, who is our number 4 team, finished the season 12-2. they didn't get into the tournament. Xavier, who's our number 3 team at 12-6, did. Talladega College, their women, who finished the regular season 15-3, and they are number 2 team after spending practically almost a whole season as number 1. They dropped to number 2. They didn't get into the tournament. So it's like, it's crazy how one win by the one team that was not a co-champion affects the co-champions, but that's what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, there conceivably could have been 2 GCAC teams in had Xavier not had their run. And look, that's not on Xavier, that's on everybody else.
Yeah, you would have got the automatic and the at-large probably.
Right. And then, of course, so our number 1 team, as we mentioned on our podcast recently with Coach Trelane Powell, Tuskegee, 12-1, fantastic season, well-deserved. I mean, they slowly kind of moved their way up. The big week against Benedict helped, and then they just finished the season with wins. And 12-1 is how they ended. And I hope they show out in the national tournament, to be perfectly honest with you. Hope they show out.
Now, a couple of things about the polls, Brian. On the small school side, both men and women, Langston, Tuskegee, and Xavier can still move. The other teams are pretty much locked. Langston is still in the hunt because if they get on a run in the NAIA tournament, they can bump up into the top 5. Benedict won't get to the top 5. Edward Waters, if Langston gets up, Edward Waters would be the team that would be bumped out of the top 5. So Tuskegee is sitting there at number 1. Another a win by Tuskegee in the conference tournament outside of a championship run for Xavier will yield Tuskegee as our small school national champion. So the only way Tuskegee is not potentially the national champion is if they lose early and Xavier makes it to, I believe it's Iowa that they're playing in, or is it in South Dakota, where the NAIA championship's at? Wherever it's at.
Sioux Falls, Iowa.
Okay, but Xavier would have to make a deep run into the tournament to become the number 1. They mathematically could become the number 1 with a deep run. On the men's side, there are only 3 teams that could possibly have a chance for a national championship. Mm-hmm. That being Talladega, Xavier, and Stillman. The number 4 and the number 5 will not change. The order of 1, 2, and 3 could possibly change.
Okay.
And the large school was obviously is still to be determined based upon what happens in the 2 conference tournaments that are ongoing as we speak.
Okay.
And yes, I found the tweet finally.
All right, go ahead. I'll let you explain that tweet from Coach, and then we'll hit a break as soon as you finish there.
Vincent Robinson, who is assistant coach over at Miles College, and this was on Twitter. This came out on Wednesday. We had a good 10-1 season with the loss by 1 point. I have no idea how the NCAA committee saw fit not to select Miles College for the NCAA tournament. Just does not seem justifiable when they selected teams in our regions with 5 losses. Miles, and then he tweeted a graphic showing Miles with the number 1 scoring defense and Miles with the number 1 rated, number 1 field goal percentage defense in the nation, Brian. In the nation, not in the region, in the nation. I responded to this tweet. A lot of good hashtag HBCU were left out, both in the hashtag NCAA and hashtag NAIA. Then I went back a couple of hours later after thinking about that tweet. I listed good teams left out at Miles College Golden Bears, at Benedict Tigers men's basketball, at Benedict women's basketball, at Bearcats Hoops, which is Rust, at Dega Tornadoes women's basketball, at EWC men and women basketball. Some questions need to be asked, and some questions need to be asked to and answered by at NCAA D2 and at NAIA. And the biggest thing that we heard from the coaches who were left out, their frustration was the moving target and the formula not being applied equitably. So how could they build their schedule? How can they build their RPI? How can they build their ARC and all these other measurable metrics if you're saying one thing, what's on paper, but you're applying it differently?
Yeah.
That was the coach's biggest frustration.
Well, look, that's a mouthful, and he has every right to be perturbed, ticked off. Valid questions. Some maybe Drew. There's an investigation or an investigative reporter out there that may want to find out the answers, because I think that's what it'll take. I mean, some serious interviews will have to be had with people, some off the record, some on the record. It'll be interesting to kind of see if we're able to get any answers. But you know what? First, we may have to go back and really look and do some analysis, not at just this year, the previous 5 to 10 years. We may have to really draw deep and look at the statistics of who got in, who didn't get in, compared to these other teams, and really do a deep dive. I think it may yield some interesting results.
Well, the NAIA went to a new formula that they call ARC, which I finally got a coach to break down what ARC is, and ARC is garbage. Is another garbage statistic from what they were able to tell me and what I was able to ascertain.
Explain why it's garbage.
Because it's still subjective. They're trying to make it as a quantitative metric, but it's really qualitative.
Are any of these metrics sound? Are any of them? Don't they all have their biases in them inherently?
Yeah, but the ARC was supposed to be something that was more pure number driven, but those numbers are still dictated by opinions. It's not like our formula that we use for our ratings, where you plug in numbers into a spreadsheet, and the numbers are what the numbers are, and you roll with those numbers.
Yeah, but
this. Well, let me finish on ARC before you throw your butt out.
Okay.
But the ARC is a rating based on raters from each conference. So basically, it's conferences voting for who their number 1 team is, who their number 2 team is, who their number 3 team is, et cetera, et cetera. And those go into basically a pool that ranks on 1 through whatever. So you may have the number 4 ARC in your conference. Basically, all that's saying is somebody on this committee thinks you're the 4th best team in the conference.
Okay.
So that's why I made it's subjective.
So it already starts that way. Right.
It starts that way. So now go ahead with your comment. The basis of it is subjective, which leads to inherent biases.
Well, but I was going to say, you could also, can't you create biases by adding little extras, bonuses, and deductions for various things in a formula.
As an economist, I will say this: you can make numbers say just about anything that you want them to say. You could take a graph and make a graph say what you want it to say.
Right.
If you're good at what you do.
Okay.
You can it can look like something is doubling, but you can show a break in the graph where it doesn't look like it's doubling. So there are tricks that you learn when you really study these numbers, not only the numbers, but the presentation of the numbers.
Okay. Let's do this. Let's take a break. When we come back, we've got to get into talking about the tournament. We've got superlatives from the MEAC, from the SWAG. I got some issues. We've got tournament news to talk about. We got some breaking news to talk about related to the tournament and football. We will wrap it up with some football news because, yeah, there is spring football happening. There was a great week of football games played, some big upsets, and we've got some players of the week and various accolades to recognize. So you're watching and listening to the BCSN Sports Wrap with Bryan and A.D. We'll be back right after these words.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports Network.
Tell everybody they can follow their dreams.